It's been 7 years since I did the initial retrospective. Oh my.
It makes me question why!
We're all getting old. Everyone's getting old. And soon we'll be too old. Too old to move. Too old to breathe. I should calm down. So, talking seriously, welcome back to the Tomb Raider Retrospective Part 4! I know, you probably didn't expect a Part 4. Nobody expected this. Well, maybe some of you did. Because you're thinking, well, Darkness, don't you have to talk about, like, the Reboot series? Duh. You have to do Part 4. Well, first of all, I don't have to do anything, okay? I don't know who you think you are, but you're not the boss of me! Sorry, that was way over the line. But to be honest, even before the Reboot series was finished, I always wanted to do a Part 4, and there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, let's look back. The Tomb Raider Retrospective, not only was I able to share my love for a series, you know, that I've adored since its inception, but I actually got people to look into the series. I actually, you know, made more fans of the series by sharing my appreciation for it. I got so many comments from people, not just other fans who were already appreciating what I was trying to do, but I got a bunch of people saying that they only tried the series because I told them how good it was. And that, it's very humbling, you know, to know that I was able to get other people to appreciate something that I already love so much. But the other thing is that there's more stuff to talk about beyond the main series. I covered the main series, but there are other games that I didn't talk about. For example, the Gameboy Color games, Tomb Raider and Tomb Raider Curse of the Sword. And I bet at least a good portion of you were just like, wait, there's Gameboy Color Tomb Raider games? I know, it's one of those weird things. Like, nobody talks about these. And I don't really blame them for that because they're a little more obscure, but I'm gonna talk about them because it's important. You may be wondering, how does one make a Tomb Raider game on the Game Boy Color? The answer is you don't. Well, not as it is on the consoles, obviously. This is a side-scroller, which was probably the most logical way to go. After all, Tomb Raider is a platformer, so yeah, you can't do 3D on a Game Boy Color, at least not in a way that's going to work well, so you might as well do a side-scroller. And I'm surprised by the level of detail they put into the controls. There's a surprisingly large amount of actions that Lara can perform in these games, you know, considering the Game Boy Color had a very limited button availability. In addition, the game looks great for the console, and the animations are very fluid and detailed. Also, I'm going to stress that whenever I talk about this, I'm talking about both games, because they're basically the same from a gameplay perspective. They just have different levels and different stories. And the stories are nothing super exciting. Either way, we're here for the game. And again, not a bad experience, but I do have a complaint. See, so when they did this, they basically tried to model the 3D controls and switch them to a 2D plane. And they did a really good job of that, but the problem with that is that we already know what a 2D side-scroller is supposed to be. When the original Tomb Raider games were made, 3D platformers were still pretty new. So the controls were up to developer interpretation and different things you could do with them. But here, like, listen, we've done 2D platformers for years at this point. I mean, from Mario to Sonic and everything in between, so doing this and making it control just like the 3D Tomb Raider games, it's a good thing to do because it feels like a Tomb Raider game, but it doesn't feel like a good 2D side-scroller. It just feels slow and clunky and just not that fun to play. Which is unfortunate because I could tell a lot of work went into these to make them what they are, and I think they're technically very impressive. It's just, I don't think they're very enjoyable to play as games. If you're looking at these and think they might be worth a look, I'd say give them a try. They're not bad, they're just not what you'd expect out of a typical 2D side-scroller, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Moving swiftly forward to the GBA, we have Tomb Raider, The Prophecy. What prophecy? I don't know. It's a prophecy, though. It's probably really important. This is not very good. And I deeply resent that because I was hoping this game was going to prove my pre-notions of it wrong, because the cover is gothic Lara from Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness, and you'd think, knowing me, that I would really appreciate a gothic look for a character, and normally I do. But the problem is, whenever I see gothic Lara, I think of Angel of Darkness, and then I have PTSD flashbacks from that game, and then I wind up having to drink myself to sleep at night for about a month. It's just not good. So, going in, I was like, oh no, this better not be what I think it is. And to be fair, it's not what I thought it was going to be. Its problems have nothing to do with the game necessarily being buggy or unfinished. It's working as intended. It's just what it's doing is not very good. On the surface, it looks like a typical, top-down adventure game with some platforming elements and some combat, and honestly, on the surface, the game works pretty well. You can run and jump and, climb over stuff like typical Tomb Raider fashion, and, there's shooting and combat, and yeah, the problem is that this game is mind-numbingly boring. It is the most boring Tomb Raider game I think exists, because no, Tomb Raider is a lot about puzzles and creative puzzles. There's all sorts. There's block puzzles, there's find the thing to put it in the thing puzzles, there's physics-based puzzles, there's all sorts of stuff in the series. This game decided that the only puzzle they were going to have is find the switch to open door / stop trap. Every single frame of this game, in every single level, is like this. Walk into a place, maybe kill an enemy, find the switch to open the door. That's all you're doing. It is mind-numbingly, outrageously dull. I can't even believe it that it's this boring. And it's just gross. I mean, the GBA was capable of producing a decent Tomb Raider game. You did it on the Game Boy Color. What happened here? The thing that really makes me mad, more than anything, is that I don't even have that much to say about it. It's so boring. It's one of those games. I could talk for days about Angel of Darkness and all its problems, but with this one, there's nothing technically wrong with it. There's nothing visually wrong with it. There's nothing even musically wrong with it. It's just boring. Now that I've gotten past that, and I've gotten all that out, let's discuss Tomb Raider Legend. No, you might be very confused because I already talked about Tomb Raider Legend, so why would I be revisiting it? Well, because we're going to talk about Tomb Raider Legend on the GBA and the Nintendo DS. Oh yes. See, the reason I've chosen to do this is that this was back during the time when handhelds and consoles had vastly different technical capabilities. Nowadays, if you got a game on a console and then wanted to play the 3DS version, it might be not on the same level, but close enough to it that it's pretty much the same game. That was not the case back then, particularly with the GBA and the DS. Legend on the GBA is actually a side-scroller, and a surprisingly decent one. It doesn't control like the Game Boy Color ones did, instead it's just a run and jump platformer. Is it as fun as the console version? No. But it does follow the console version's story pretty well, and if you're looking for something different and you like side-scrollers and you want to play one featuring Lara Croft, it's not a bad experience. It's unique, certainly. The Nintendo DS version actually added 3D to the equation here. Not like the consoles, obviously, but basically, there's 2D sprites, but it's a 3D plane. It's actually kind of like Sonic Battle in that regard, now that I think about it. It looks alright, though. I don't think it looks bad. It's an interesting idea. And again, it gives you that, third dimension that, a handheld Tomb Raider would have really benefited from prior to now. So, hey, I can't complain about that. What I can complain about is the way they did the combat. So the combat is purely based on the touchscreen. Every single engagement starts this weird touchscreen minigame where you have to tap on the touchscreen in order to shoot the enemies. It seemed kind of cool at first, but then it kept happening. Repeatedly. The whole time. Every single freaking time with this touchscreen minigame. And it just doesn't feel like it belongs in the game. It's just out of place. They were just looking for an excuse to use the touchscreen controls, but didn't have any great ideas, so they just put it into the combat. And you might be thinking, well, is it mandatory? Well, not technically, but if you don't do it with the touchscreen, Lara will basically miss every single shot. So yeah, it's mandatory. I guess if you could look past that, it's not a bad version of the game, but it's probably the weakest one that I've played just because the touchscreen is a weird idea. Moving swiftly forward, let's talk about Tomb Raider Underworld. On the DS. Because that exists too. I was genuinely shocked by this, because Underworld was pushing the envelope in terms of visuals in its generation, and you would think that trying to adapt that to a handheld would not be the greatest idea, but they went full side-scroller with it, and it actually looks really good for the console. And in fact, this is a pretty decent adaptation of Underworld. The visual style is very similar to the console. Obviously, it's much lower res, and it's 2D, but hey, it's pretty cool. And they use the touchscreen properly this time by, instead of having it affect combat at all, it in fact is used to solve the puzzles in the game, which was a brilliantly good idea. It actually makes this a really good version of Underworld, albeit different, but still, hey, it's Underworld, just a reimagining of it, I guess. Would I recommend any of these over the console versions? No, because they are by default inferior, but on their own, if you're looking at them and say, hey, that looks pretty cool, you might have some fun with them. None of them are truly bad titles. Also, you might be wondering why I'm not talking about the PSP versions of Legend and Underworld. That is very simple. The PSP versions are effectively lower res versions of the console versions. They're almost the same game, just at a lower resolution. They're still 3D, they still follow the same story. The PSP was very powerful for its time, and they took full advantage of that. So there's no point to talk about those ports, because they're effectively the console version, just in a handheld and with worse graphics. Woohoo! Oh, before I finish talking about Underworld, it is absolutely imperative when we talk about versions, I need to correct a mistake I have made in Part 3. Now, in Part 3, I was talking about Underworld, I was talking about how it's my favorite Tomb Raider game ever. And it is. And how much I love that game. And I do. But I also said, hey, you can play it on so many different platforms. You know, the 360 version, you know, is probably the best because of the DLC, but you can get it on the PS3 and PC and play it there. Don't actually get the PC version. Do not do that! The PC version is outrageously broken. I'm convinced it was never patched, unlike the other versions. It is so buggy. I have never been so upset in my life because I love that game, and it's great on the consoles, but the PC version is absolutely disgusting. So get it anywhere else. Play the DS version first, it's better. Okay, Darkness, you talked about handhelds enough. We don't care, we only care about console games. You should be finished, right? Haha, you fools! You forgot about the mobile Tomb Raider games! Lara Croft Go and Lara Croft Relic Run. I admit, I don't really have much to say about either of these two. Relic Run is, well, it's Temple Run, with Tomb Raider elements thrown in there. There's some parkour and you can fight some enemies, so it's not just a ripoff of Temple Run, but it is? I don't know. It's not bad. It's alright for a phone game, but it's nothing special. And it's got microtransactions, but it is free to play, so, that's your choice at that point. As for Lara Croft Go, well, this is a bit more interesting, and in fact, has received rave reviews from people. People seem to really like this one. It's just a puzzler with Lara Croft, though. In fact, a lot of the reviews I've read point this out, and they're right, that this isn't really a Tomb Raider game so much as a puzzle game with Lara Croft in it. There's nothing in it that really makes it Tomb Raider, you know, or what you would expect from Tomb Raider. It's just Lara Croft in a puzzle game. Also, this game is not free to play and still has microtransactions, and that is a big pet peeve of mine. It's one or the other. You cannot have both. That is forbidden as far as I'm concerned. Don't frickin' do that. I hate that. I hate that so much. Okay, now for real, I'm done with the handhelds. We don't have to talk about them anymore. I got through them. We gotta talk about the Guardian of Light and the Temple of Osiris. These are isometric puzzlers that are co-op, and they're actually really fun. The visuals are great because they use the Underworld engine for these games, and the puzzles are surprisingly interesting, and if you're playing co-op, require teamwork. It's a great idea, and it works really well in both games. But all in all, these are fun experiences with a ton of unlockables and things to do and extras. They're fun to play with friends. Nothing too exciting, but fun. And I think they're worth it to play, just in that regard. The only thing that bothers me with Temple of Osiris is that they don't even make a reference. Not a single reference to Last Revelation. If it's not in canon with that, fine, but you can at least pay homage to it in some way. I mean, the main villain's set, just like in Last Revelation. You didn't even attempt to mention that. I feel like it's important. You know, don't be disrespecting Last Revelation like that. It deserves better. So now we can talk about the Reboot series, right? No! We have to talk about the frickin' cartoons! Tomb Raider cartoons! The series is called Tomb Raider Revisioned, and it was released exclusively through GameTap. And if you don't know what that is, I do not blame you. But it's a now defunct online service that was, well, it's kind of like Netflix for games, but not really. It was a product of its time, I guess. But it was released exclusively through that service, so you couldn't exactly get it any other way until more recently when people just threw it on YouTube. But anyway, this is a 10-episode series with a couple multi-part episodes where each individual episode has a completely separate art style. It's a little strange, but it's actually surprisingly great. Every single story here is remarkably interesting. There's some that are less thrilling than others, but there's also the episode called Pre-Teen Raider, which I think could be used as a really great pilot for a kids show. Like, honestly, it was great. It's got a really nice art style, and it'd be so good for little girls. Like, I'm just saying, it would be great to market it that way because, you know, just Lara Croft in school, doing Lara Croft things when she was in primary school. I mean, look, I thought it was interesting. It's a fun episode. And in fact, this whole series had a lot of effort and love put into it. And it's actually surprising and upsetting that a lot of people haven't experienced it. I'm not gonna go into individual detail in this video due to length reasons when it comes to each individual episode. But I will say the series is overall good, and if you're a fan of Tomb Raider, I guarantee you there will be at least one episode that you will like out of it because, like I said, they're all unique. The only exceptions would be the first three, it's a three-parter, which was great, by the way. They did Eon Flux art style, and it works so great for Tomb Raider. And then there's also that double-part Angel Spit one, which had a weird art style I didn't like. But, you know, other than that, every single episode has a unique style to it and a unique story to it, so basically there's gonna be something for everybody. It was a brilliant concept, and I only wish it was more than 10 episodes, but you can't have everything in life. Like me, I can't have anything in life. That's why I'm still doing videos on YouTube. You think I do this for you? It's because I have no other choice. I had to go back to my roots and start reviewing Tomb Raider games, and it's all your fault! Listen, I've had a dark alter ego that has been traumatizing me for years. I live with a stupid freaking Tails doll that will not leave. My roommate Shadow is still complaining about toilet paper even though he hasn't paid his rent in like 3 years, and my cat exists. So I'm under a lot of stress. Don't take it. Don't take it. You guys rock. You have a great day. Okay. Let's talk about comic books! There's Tomb Raider comic books! Those exist! And if you're wondering if I own them, of course I own a bunch of these! Every single time I've gone into a comic book in my past, I have looked for these so I can get the whole collection, because I'm out of my mind! I need to settle down. Did I take my medication last night? Maybe I didn't. That would make sense. Okay, in all seriousness, this is a great series. It was made by Top Cow Productions, the guys behind Witchblade and The Darkness, and in fact, Lara Croft was introduced to their comics through a crossover with Witchblade and The Darkness. Yes, there exists a comic book called The Darkness and Tomb Raider, which doesn't feature me. It hurts. Okay. But anyway, this is a great series with beautiful artwork and interesting stories to tell. Lara is more human compared to her game counterpart. She's not so much of an action hero as a real person, but the way they interpreted her character is absolutely brilliant. It's pretty much Lara Croft in the Legend series. It's that Lara. That's pretty much who she is, except her art is more like the classic Lara. So it's like those two mashed together. Obviously, this is all considered non-canon and exclusive to the comic book, but again, these are great stories with great additional characters, some of which I talked about in other videos, like my reviews of the movies, which if you haven't seen that, go watch them, because I'm not going to talk about the movies again. Why would I do that? My only complaint with these, if there is one, is that the crossover with Witchblade, which was the initial introduction of Lara, got really frickin' weird. Like, I still don't know what happened here. This is Lara, by the way. She got possessed, and somehow she came back by going into another dimension that was like the Middle East sometime in the 1500s, and then she came back through a magic lamp. I don't know what happened, and I've read it multiple times. It makes no sense. Outside of that, though, the actual individual Tomb Raider comics are really, really, really good, and I highly recommend these ones. Now you may be wondering, well, Darkness, what about the newer Tomb Raider comics? Because those exist. And yes, those are based on modern Lara. I haven't read those too thoroughly just yet, though what I've read, they do seem pretty good, and the artwork is, again, beautiful. But now I can finally segue into the Reboot series, which everyone wants to hear my thoughts on. I already covered the original Reboot game, and I loved it. It was a great game. But the more this series has gone on, the more it has started to bug me. Rise of and Shadow are great games. There's no question in my mind. Let's start with Rise Of. Let me review them as games real quick for you, and then we'll talk about my issues. Rise Of takes the same mechanics we saw in the first Reboot game and adapts them to Siberia. Basically, Lara Croft is just in a new element. The story's pretty interesting, with Lara trying to prove that her father wasn't a complete maniac, and now there's this weird religious organization called Trinity that is definitely totally not a metaphor for the Catholic Church. Subtle, whatever. They're trying to stop finding other artifacts because religion and God frowns upon it, and there's this gem that creates immortality or some nonsense I don't even know. It's a pretty interesting plot, I guess, but I felt like it felt kind of flat compared to the Legends plot. Honestly, I thought the first Reboot game had a better plot, but that's just me. The gameplay, however, is great. Stealth elements are back, and actually way better than they were in the first game. And the scope of the environment is absolutely fantastic, and the world is beautiful. I love the environment in this game. Platforming is a ton of fun, puzzles are there, optional tombs still exist, and the combat is just as good as it was in the first. You can craft new items, you can craft new weapons, you can upgrade Lara's skills. Overall, it's a great experience. I already made a video about this, talking about it at more length when I first played it, but now that I can look at it with fresh eyes, I still think it's a great game. As for Shadow, well, it's still a good game here, but this has more flaws with the plot in my opinion. Like, they completely threw out Trinity for this one, and just made it not about that at all. Even though they're like there, they get killed off screen? And it's like, why'd you set up villains that didn't matter? Was it because people complained that they were so thinly veiled as a metaphor that you decided to get rid of them? Look, that's worse than just carrying it out. If you're gonna write a really cliche religious organization, evil guys plot, at least go through with the whole thing and not just write them out at the end, because now we care less, because obviously you didn't even care. And the main villain just doesn't come across as very intimidating. He's just some dude. Like, Lara has no connection with him. He's just there. It's like, okay. And I really had trouble getting into Lara herself in this game, because this is where I'm getting onto my issues with the Reboot series in general. These games are called Tomb Raider, and that's great. They are not. Not in the sense that I would consider them Tomb Raider. Yes, they have all the Tomb Raider elements, platforming, puzzle, action. That's all great. You're missing a key element here, and it's Lara herself. This Lara is a good character, but she does not come across the same way as classic Lara did. You know, I don't mind redesigning her for modern audiences. Yes, for modern audiences, the original Lara, way too much sex appeal. We don't need that. That's not necessary. It's her personality that's bothering me. Lara was originally kind of an action hero, like this enigma. Like, she was larger than life and she dominated every scene she was in. But modern Lara is just a girl. There's nothing wrong with that. But here's my thing. A lot of modern day games, when they try to make female protagonists, seem to have a really big thing for making all the female protagonists just normal girls. And put them into these really ridiculous situations to show, you know, feminine power. That's great. Except that, you know, we as male gamers have a lot of male idols in games that are effectively superhuman and larger than life. Master Chief, Ryu from Ninja Gaiden, insert name of Call of Duty protagonist here. Like, these guys are not regular guys. So why don't women get women that are not regular women? I thought that's what Lara was for. She was the female protagonist of a game. She was effectively an action hero. Like, Samus is the same way. She has a friggin' power suit. She does things that no woman would ever be normally capable of. But the whole point is that you're presenting these women in the same way you present male protagonists. They're superhumans. They're superheroes. You know, they're action stars. Like, that's the whole point of these characters. That's what Lara was imagined at. And I feel like by bringing her down to just, you know, normal status, you lose something. You lose the magic of what makes her a Tomb Raider. What makes her Lara Croft. Is she a good character? Sure, yeah, she's great. Except in Shadow, which we'll talk about in a second. But for the most part, yeah, she's a great character. She still has a fascination with the past. She still can take out armies of trained mercenaries by herself, which if she's just a regular person. Kind of makes me feel a little weird about it, but whatever. Actually, no, I really need to talk about this. You can't have her be doing these ridiculous things and then have her still be like, no, I'm just a normal girl, just like you. Like, why do you have to talk down to women? As if they can't decide for themselves to love someone who, you know, as a role model might be at an unachievable height. Like, I know I'm never gonna be as strong or as awesome as Master Chief. Doesn't stop me from idolizing Master Chief, you know? That's just an example. My point is that you've lost what made Lara Croft Lara Croft. You didn't lose that in the Legends series. She was still herself. You gave her more personality and made her more of a person. That's fine. But you can't just remove every aspect of her and then replace it with somebody else entirely. I don't even feel like this is the same character anymore. And maybe in a reboot series, that may be what they wanted, but like, when you rebooted Devil May Cry, different company I know, that version of Dante, yeah, he was still Dante, let's be honest. They weren't that different when it came to personality. And here, Lara isn't Lara. She's just, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. From a gameplay perspective, all the games are great. They're good games, they're fun, they're great experiences. I would recommend them. But would I call them Tomb Raider? I don't know. Maybe it's because I've been with the series so long that it's hard to watch it change this way. Maybe I'm getting too old to understand, I don't know. If you want to tell me in the comments how wrong I am, feel free. Maybe I'm misinterpreting it. After all, I'm a guy. Maybe from a woman's eyes, it might be different. I'm willing to entertain that. I would love to hear your thoughts. But in my opinion, we've kind of lost a lot of the magic of what the original series brought to the table. In addition, Lara's an idiot in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and we have to friggin' talk about it. The very first thing she does, the first thing, is cause the Mayan apocalypse! On purpose! What? You might be saying, well, there were guys coming and she had to take it, otherwise she was gonna get killed. This is the same woman who has mowed down armies several times in the previous games. That does not fall under the list of excuses. Okay? Okay. She just took it because she knew she needed it to solve the mystery. But she also knew what it was gonna do. Immediately after she has done this, she caused a tsunami. A tsunami that presumably killed, at the bare minimum, thousands of innocent people. And like, the first thing that happens is that she's like, oh no! And then they like never talk about it again, as if that never happened. And I adore the fact that in your character-driven story with more dialogue and, you know, better visuals and more time to establish the story, you have somehow written Lara as a less caring person than the last Revelation did in her previous incarnation when she did a similar but slightly different thing. See, in the beginning of that game, Lara recovers the amulet of Horus, which was a sacred Egyptian artifact that was used to seal away the evil god Set. When she removed it from the tomb of Set, she unwittingly released him, and he is now trying to create his own evil version of the world and effectively start the apocalypse, because he's evil, he's Set, that's what he does. But there's a few differences here. First of all, Lara shows a great deal more remorse about it the entirety of this game. The whole time, she's like, oh, shoot. And then she goes out of her way to fix it, to fix her error. And she does by almost sacrificing her life. Like, it's such a better narrative in that regard in terms of, you know, someone paying the ultimate price to correct a mistake they made. And she didn't know that that's what that amulet was for before she took it. And the whole point of that, you might be saying, well, why didn't she do more research? The whole point is that Lara got a bit too big from her britches. It humanized her and made it clear to us as players and people who cared about her that while she is larger than life and an awesome action hero and just, you know, violently intelligent in every conceivable way, she's also an imperfect human who's capable of making a mistake. She is not infallible, and she starts this game by making an error, by not researching enough, by not realizing what she was about to do or unleash on the world. And the whole game is her paying for that error. In this game, Lara makes this mistake on purpose, kills thousands, and then they just never bring it up again. As if everything's fine. Like, yes, you stopped Trinity and you saved the world from the apocalypse. That you started! And then everyone's like, oh, that's great! I'm so glad we did that! Hooray! Good job, Lara! Lara, there are thousands of people who are dead. You could at least say something about it. It's not well written in that regard. For making a more human Lara Croft, you have actually lost a substantial amount of her humanity. What? I don't get it. It's a good game. It is. It's beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. All the Reboot games are. And the gameplay's solid. And there's still fun experiences. But this, whoever's writing this, I implore you, please do better next time. And now that we've finished the Reboot series, because really we needed 3 games to tell Lara Croft's origins. That was really necessary. Can we actually get to what makes Tomb Raider again? You know, and make Lara Croft Lara Croft? I get it. You were trying to tell her origins. I get it. You were trying to establish her as when she was younger, more naive. Okay, that's fine. Can we move on now? Can we get back to what Legend did? Get back to Underworld? Please? No? Yeah, that's what I thought. Oh well. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.
This is Lara.